I wonder if you guys have heard of, I think this is the right way to say it, but cardinal sins. Um, this is kind of something that I feel like I learned about a while ago, like when I was very young. Like, there's just some things that you don't do, like no matter what, no matter how angry you are, or like you just don't do them because, like, once you cross that line, you can't ever go back. If I'm being honest, I kind of feel like gayness for men is one of those things. Um, I feel like murder is also one of those things. And I think that, like, there are certain, like, racist sort of thing. Like, I'm specifically thinking about what's happening with, like, Palestine and the Jews. And I don't know all of the history with Jewish people, but I do know for a very, very, very long time, Jews were hated. I think this has something to do with Jesus. I'm not sure if the Jews killed Jesus or something. For some reason, everyone, like all the other religious groups, hated the Jews. So even no matter how much money they have, because they've always had money. And I think that even when they were way more hated than now, they had money. What I'm seeing now is something that is like very strange. Like the US is very powerful today, but this reign is coming to an end. And it does feel like the US is actually Israel's only ally. I saw something, it might have been a day or 2 days ago, where it looks like Beverly Hills was hanging up the Israel flag in every single school, just hanging up the flag. Um, you know, I think that those two groups are in a place where they have done so much evil that, like, you just never come back from that. And like I never understood, I couldn't really understand too much about like why World War II was so instrumental in the rest of the world. I've said this before, but I never understood. European history doesn't make much sense to me. But I do know that World War II was like so impactful in terms of European history. Like, it just really changed something. And so on all the walking tours that I did when I was there, I always would do the like Jewish walking tour. And the when I was in Prague, that walking tour was very interesting. Was it in no, it wasn't. I'm sorry, it was not in Prague. It was in Vienna, so in Austria. There were a couple things I learned while I was in Austria that I think are useful to share here. Austria, and I think Prague is the other place I'm thinking about, but it could have been Budapest. I gotta go back to my notes. In Vienna, though, Hitler lived there for a while. I want to say for like 4 years, and he was very poor, and he lived in the Jewish quarters. Like, the Jewish quarters were isolated from the rest of the society, and he was like working with Jewish people. So it was very strange, right? That all of a sudden, Hitler, he started following this very radical thought leader, and then, became so anti-Jewish, which is very strange because, like, he was living in like the Jewish quarters for so long. So there was that. That still doesn't make much sense to me, but there are other things like the propaganda that Hitler used to kill a very large number of Jews. So I think this was in Prague, but I have to go back and double check. But the story goes like this. There was a town, so the Nazis moved a very large number of Jews to this one. It was supposed to be like a new suburb. That was the big idea. We're gonna move these Jews to this suburb. And so over the span of, I want to say it was like a week, yeah, it was like a week or 2 weeks, he invited all these journalists from every publication. Like, the New York Times, I think, was there. like all the really major publications at the time, maybe the New York Times wasn't invented yet, I'm not positive about this, like fact check me, but there's actually videos of this. So he gets them all to come because he wants to show, like, no, we don't hate Jewish people. Look at them. They're living this wonderful life in this town. And so all the journalists come out. There's like 50 journalists. And for a week and a half, they kind of simulated the town to make it look like everything was flourishing. So people were going to jobs. The kids looked like they were playing in the play structures and stuff, and the town was really new. It was isolated. And so then the journalists leave. Now here's where the story gets really good. One day after the reporters leave, the Nazis take every person that was in that video, every single Jewish person that was in that entire documentary, and they burn them in an oven. They have like a kill camp. So they kill every single person who was in the video. It was like a mass murder. So the whole town is now known as just like this mass murder. But the documentaries about how great this town is have already come out because the journalists left like a week before they did this. So now so for a week, this documentary has been floating around everywhere, and it's been talking about how wonderful this camp is and how everyone is getting along and everything is wonderful. And so after like a week of it being on air and it being circulated around, the Nazis kill every person in the video. Like the whole town is murdered. It's children, it's mothers, it's everybody who was like on screen. That was the last time that they were alive. They kill everybody. And then I can't remember exactly how the journalists started retracting their statements and everyone was trying to like roll back. But what I'm trying to prove is that propaganda is so powerful because like he just set that up. It was a whole fucking scheme. But it was a scheme that only took 2 weeks to execute, beginning to end. And the point of that story is the way that the way that like whatever you believe, right, and what you see and what you like understand based on the other people around you who've been told the same story, right? So only you and your story, you guys have all been told the same lie. But there might be somebody else with a bit more power and a bit more strategy who is also creating a story, and that story is kind of based on you to an extent falling into a trap, like I feel like those people did. Now, watching the reporters roll back this story is the most pathetic thing you will ever read because it was just so brutal. I think there were like 300,000 people or something that were killed in a day. Like they murdered everybody, and he like called in more troops to like help eradicate. Like what I am trying to prove with this story is the power of your own tribe, really. Like, yes, it's the power of your own tribe, because just imagine, put yourself in the shoes of those journalists for a minute and imagine how participating in that documentary and then having to roll back your statement and like literally reclaiming the narrative would change your entire perspective as a writer, as a journalist, because like you actually contributed to not just the false narrative, but you almost like incentivized the murder of people. That's kind of what I feel like is happening with putting those flags up in the schools in Beverly Hills. Like they're trying to maybe immunize the students or give the students a story, a positive story of death. And then those students are going to grow up and they're going to realize all of those people were murdered in the same way. You see how like those journalists had to be like, fuck, that is actually not very cool. Now I feel like so many of us, like I'm not actually that invested in Palestine or Israel, like not really my story, but I am invested in the journalism part of it all. I think you have to start with the truth and you have to end with the truth. But the point actually that I want to make is kind of our position in that story is, if you extrapolate that just a little bit and think about how that relates to other parts of society. I actually wrote this and I'm trying to like explain the thought process of what I wrote. Sometimes it seems like there's a beef between two people. Like maybe you're on the side that thinks like Black Americans and white Americans have this beef and everybody's trying to prove a lesson to each other. Okay, but sometimes like you are trying to prove a lesson, teach a lesson to someone else, right? By inserting an action. So maybe you throw a pencil or something at someone else. You say a bad word to someone else. You take someone else's life. You might believe in your mind that like you have caused justice. You have done this action to this specific individual. The problem is we live in one society. So no matter what you believe that you have done to impact this isolated person, other people are going to be impacted by that. And there's really no telling like how exactly the other people are going to be impacted by your action. This is the part that is actually extremely concerning to me, and it really makes me very concerned for like the lives of Jewish people. It's like the more that I think about religion, and the more I'm like, there's serious tension between all the religious groups. They don't like each other. But historically, so many, like when I went to this was in Prague. This was for sure in Prague. This was in I think it was called like CP7. On the wall, on like it's literally cemented on the wall. There's this quote, and it's like comparing Jewish people to dogs, like they're less than dogs, and they have it in cement on the wall. I'm not sure, because like I said, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Christian, like I'm not Muslim, so I'm just interpolating from stories that I do understand. But there's quite a lot of people that are not Jewish, and historically they have been so anti that group. And to be so loud and proud about the real murder and atrocities that you're causing now, and then propagating that with like flags and memorandum, to me it is like setting the stage for another Holocaust, which is pathetic. But it's usually people digging their own graves in like the system of life. I just thought last night's conversation was like really interesting, because I didn't realize that I'm changing the subject, but I didn't realize that many men, because it was basically like a room full of like Black American men and African men, describing how they believe like 79% of white men are gay. And I was like, I never heard that take before. But then you start to like, people started to explain it, and they started to, you know, use a bunch of references from history. And like I said, European history is just not my thing. Like I don't pay, you know, but it does really feel like whatever was happening with the Greeks and the slippers and the dresses, I do feel like whatever the fuck that was, that does seem to be like the primary story. But even when I looked into like that story more, homosexuality was a major part of like that culture. Other people started explaining how just bestiality was really important. Obviously we've talked about Neanderthals here. It's kind of like, do we want to like get to the point where we're saying like, okay, so Europeans are just like genetically homosexuals? Like, I don't really know, but it does really feel like some. And then another man started talking about buck breaking, and I guess like I'd heard that term before, but I never thought about like contextually what it really means. And we could talk about it briefly, but it is kind of disgusting. Basically, during slavery, and like American chattel slavery specifically, very large, like physically large Black male slaves were used as like sex toys for white men. I don't know another way to say that. Like white men were fucking Black male slaves, and that process was called buck breaking. And it was like so prevalent during the time that the term still sticks around today. And that is like a level of perversion that, like, as a woman, like, I don't know if I could ever understand. But then also, this is what really makes me feel like there's something genetic there. Like, nobody, like, because then somebody else explained it. Like, yes, there's been slavery in all parts of the world, but only in this particular case did basically like white slave owners go so far as to like rape the male slaves, like adult males. Obviously, it's pedophilia is very common in European history, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about like grown-ups. It's just like, I don't know. It was strange. And like, this wasn't me saying it. I was just like listening, and listening to so many men kind of get up and explain most of the, and this was also interesting too. So most of the African men who got up and talked, they were basically like, it doesn't make sense to try to explain this. There's no rationale to it. You have to just let the white men go be gay over there and just let them like live out their lives that way. But this has nothing to do with us. I feel like that is like the main sentiment of like my whole being. The part of that though that I'm really starting to understand is like, for some reason, we keep getting inserted into their narratives. Like I told you guys the story of like Tennessee. It's like, you know, like I'm not even from here. Like, how do I get dragged into your shit? You be gay over there and just leave me the fuck alone. This is what I also don't like about like Kehlani, Zendaya. It's like Zendaya has a white mother, and most likely I feel like she's probably Jewish, because they always want to throw like the tokens into everywhere. What the fuck does Zendaya have to do with anything relating to black culture? Be serious. Like, in any way, even if you like tried to stretch it, like what the fuck would that story have to do with anything? And then here's something interesting. I saw a Pearl video, and Pearl was interviewing some guy called Homath. And the guys actually came up and started describing Zendaya as mid. They were like, yeah, you know, I don't understand why they keep putting these girls on every movie screen, every television show. We don't want to see this. And that was coming like directly from dudes' mouths, and I was like, that is hilarious. Like, I've been saying this for so long, but like, it isn't me, right? Like, I'm also not a dude. I don't know what these men like, but some things kind of are starting to make sense. Because if you think about it, if you have a group of men, specifically like white men, and that what they are attracted to is like black men. This was also brought up in a lot of ways, which I do think is very strange, and this might be a California specific thing. I talked about this a lot. Actually, the first time I had to have this conversation was with so one of my neighbors. He's like a Latin man. So he's a biracial man. So his mother's black, his father's white, but his wife is Hispanic, right? And so he was sending both of his kids to art school, the same one that I went to. And he was like, you know, just tell me what it's like. And I was like, yeah, it's probably going to be okay for your daughter. I would probably, you know, definitely encourage you to maybe think about sending your son somewhere else. Because the thing about like art school is it's full of like, the men are gay. They're like super, super gay though. Like, it's not even like, you know, they're not like regular. This is so strange to say. I'm not trying to dehumanize gay people or gay men, but I'm just saying like, it is a space that's like 70% gay men or 70, you know, it's like overwhelmingly. And so if that is your social experience, especially like this adolescent experience that you're having as a man, like I would not encourage you to send a male child to that environment. That is going to stunt your growth, because it isn't like, it's just not similar. It's like a pseudo society. It's counterculture. So like that kid's not going to be around any like normal kids who are not, I'm not trying to say normal, but how can I say, he's not going to be around other kids who are like him because his son is straight, right? So I don't know. That was my opinion then. And then when this conversation came up, I was like, wow. But another thing, and I said this, I'm like, I do think it's important to have gay friends, know gay people in the world, so that you can explain, so that they, like, if you have assumptions that you're making about a community, you can validate those assumptions with like real world experiences. because I feel like I've done that so often by just, having questions. There are like literally specific people I can think of where I had questions about things, and then I honestly just asked them, and then they answered the question, and it was like, oh wow, okay. And there were other terms, that I wasn't familiar with, and it's like, now I know what the terms mean, but you're not going to learn that if you know what I mean, if you don't know any person from the community. And that was a little bit strange, because it's like, Lucas actually lives in California and he doesn't know any of this, and it was just like, that's weird too. Like, how do you live your whole life in California? You don't know any gay people? Like, I do think that there are some men who live on some black men specifically who live in like a planet that is just not occupied by anyone else. It's just like it's not utopia. It's just like a strange pseudo society that like their feet aren't on the ground in a lot of ways. Yes. So the point of this though is I really wanted to explore this like a more meta concept of like the downstream effects of revenge on unintended victims. So like some action happens and there's this idea that only your intended, person is going to be impacted by your action, and in reality, people are catching strays. That's kind of the point. There was another issue though that I thought was really weird. Someone brought up January 6th and how, the MAGA people are like fed up, so they had their January 6th moment, and someone was like, I don't understand why how did the white MAGA people have a January 6th before black Americans? And the point of that was like, yeah, black Americans have no floor. And if you go back and watch the video that I made, that was the end of Black American women, that was my point there. Like, there's no floor. Like, so many black Americans do not have a limit of shit that they are willing to do. Like, once you hit a certain point, then you're just like, actually, fuck this. Like, no. You gotta have some shit that you're willing to die for. Because I do feel like it is so unfortunate, but that is where we are in society. And this is another reason why it's like very shocking that people are surprised about the mass shootings. Like, the Minnesota mass shooting is predictable. There's going to be so many more of them. But it's like the same people doing the same crime for the same reason. This is called like white, young, like, how do you say, adolescent white rage, right? Because like these people are part of a group that has just gaslit everything. Like, they're trying to tell their own kids these stories of like, we are good, we are Christian, we individually have done nothing. And then those kids grow up and they see the world. Like, they see the news like we see the news. They will come across creators like you and me, and they'll be like, these people hate us. And you don't live in a bubble. You live in society, and no matter how many like filters you try to use to say like, yeah, but there's this one example, and this is another reason why I made the video about culture fit. I do think there's this idea that some people, not all, and I don't even think most, but some people have that work or even apartment buildings or any of that shit is going to filter and enable people to even be civil to another where they like them enough to treat them like a human. And given the very long history of dehumanization in this country, there has been no reparatory action or prep steps to lead up to that, so it's not just going to happen. What happens is the Olivia strategy, where it's like you simply it's not even coexisting. It's isolated individualism in close proximity. So like, it's me having my black female experience right next door to somebody else having a white experience. And then we just never cross paths. We don't go to the same events. We actually might know similar people, but because like my dinner parties are different than your dinner parties, we don't ever talk about the same topics. Everything that we bring up in my meeting, you never bring up in your meeting. We never have any cross communication. Everybody knows what's politically correct to say in front of the other group. So all the main issues that would actually cause the cultural divide to bridge never happen. And then you just have generations, and you just get smarter and smarter, because then you just hand down that generation to like even little kids, babies, fucking neighbors, social media private groups like what is it, WeChat now, Discord, a whole bunch of other platforms and communication ways to basically, at least for Black people in America, to communicate strategies of living outside and away from them, even while being near them, which is a strange thing to say. Anyway, I do feel like I explained all the topics that I kind of, at least so far, the things that I have words for. Also, if you saw the video about the black hair boycott, and you're the person who said Black women won't stop buying gold weaves or something, well, ask yourself, are you gonna buy the gold weave in September? If you're not, then that's all you need to focus on. You don't have to, do a whole analysis about what everybody else is doing. How about you personally put down the blonde weave for 1 month, okay? And then when November rolls around again, in fucking 30 days, then buy the brown weave or the gold wig or whatever. 1 month, put down the bullshit. That's not that big of an ask. And you don't have to start dissecting this in terms of what everyone else is going to do. What are you going to do? Right?